8 mice, 4 male, 4 female, placed inside what a scientist had spent 20 years trying to build. Unlimited food, unlimited water, perfect temperature, no predators, no disease, no threats of any kind. 5 years later, every single one of them was dead. And not one death, not a single one, was caused by anything a vet could have named on a report. This is Universe 25. And once you understand what actually happened inside that enclosure, you will not be able to look at the modern world the same way again. The man behind it was an American researcher named John Calhoun. He was not famous, he was not flashy. He was an ethologist, a scientist who studies how animals behave inside societies, and he had one question that he could not let go of. What happens to a population when all the hard stuff gets removed? What happens when there is no scarcity, no danger, no struggle to survive? He had been chasing that question since the late 1940s. By the time he set up Universe 25, he had already run 24 versions of the same experiment, different enclosures, different sizes, some outside of Maryland fields, some in barn spaces, some in controlled laboratory rooms, rats, mice, varying setups, and every single time he had watched the same thing play out. Population explodes, violence spikes, reproduction breaks down, colony dies. He documented that pattern 24 times before he decided to run it one final time, cleanly, inside a federal research facility in a way that nobody could argue with. The enclosure was a 9-foot square box. Along every wall he had stacked what he called walk-up apartments, small nesting spaces stacked vertically, connected by mesh tunnels and ramps running floor to ceiling. Every hopper was always full. Every water bottle was always topped up. He had calculated the space could comfortably hold around 3,800 mice. It would never get close to that number. On day 1, he placed his 8 founders inside and sealed the lid. For the first 100 days, almost nothing happened. The mice explored the space, learned where things were, sorted out who slept where. Then the first litters arrived, and the population started doubling. Every 55 days, twice as many mice as before. By day 315, there were more than 600 animals living inside that box. That is the moment things started breaking. In a normal environment, when a mouse population grows past what a territory can hold, the surplus animals leave. They find new ground somewhere else. That is how it has always worked. Inside Universe 25, there was no somewhere else. The young males who had grown up with nowhere to go and no role to claim began drifting toward the center of the pen. They formed pools of idle bodies. Calhoun would stand above the enclosure for long stretches, just watching them lie there. These were healthy animals, well-fed, physically fine, nothing medically wrong, and they did absolutely nothing. When another mouse attacked one of them, the attacked mouse would not fight back. It would lie there, absorb the hits, then get up, walk a few feet, and lie down again. Just that, over and over. But that was only one half of what was happening. On the other end of the spectrum, a separate group of males emerged that were the opposite. Frantic, fast, completely indiscriminate. They moved through the enclosure at a pace no other mouse matched. They forced their way into nests that other males were actively defending. They ignored every courtship ritual that mouse society had maintained. Violence did not stop them. Territory did not stop them. They behaved as if the rules simply did not apply anymore, because for them, the rules had stopped meaning anything. There were no roles to win. There was nothing to earn, so the behavior that was supposed to be the means to an end became completely detached from any end at all. The females responded with their own form of withdrawal. The ones who could not find a stable place in the social order climbed to the highest apartments and stayed there, alone. They stopped interacting with males. They stopped reproducing. They became islands. Calhoun also documented something he called the behavioral sink. Food was available at equally spaced stations throughout the entire enclosure. There was no shortage anywhere, but the mice stopped eating alone. They began crowding compulsively around a handful of specific feeders, while the rest of the enclosure went almost untouched. The presence of other mice had become so deeply wired into the feeding instinct that an empty feeder with no one around it was functionally useless, no matter how full it was. The need for social context had overridden basic logic, and then the mothers started failing. The males who had originally claimed nesting territory grew exhausted from constant defense and simply stopped protecting their families. The females were left trying to defend the nest, nurse the pups, and stay fed, all at the same time with no help. They could not hold it together. Mothers began abandoning their young in scattered spots around the enclosure. Some lost track of which pups were theirs. Some stopped recognizing their own offspring entirely. And in the worst sections of the colony, mothers began killing and eating their own young. In those areas, fewer than 1 in 20 newborn mice survived long enough to be weaned. Calhoun wrote that by this point, the social fabric of the colony was gone. The bodies were still alive. What had made them a functioning society was not. The pups that did make it to adulthood had been raised by mothers who barely stayed present. They had grown up watching nothing work. They had no model of what a functioning life inside this place looked like, because there was no functioning life to observe. And when they grew up, they produced something Calhoun had never seen in any previous experiment. These males never fought. They never tried to mate. They never engaged in any kind of social behavior at all. They ate, they slept, And they groomed themselves, constantly, obsessively, with a focus that no other activity received. Their coats were perfect, no scars, no wounds from fights because they never got into any. They moved through the colony as if no other mouse existed in it. Calhoun named them the beautiful ones. From the outside, they looked like the healthiest animals in the entire enclosure. They were also, in every way that mattered to the survival of the species, completely finished. They would not reproduce. They could not maintain social bonds. Their nervous systems had developed inside a world where every role was already occupied, and they had simply stepped outside the whole thing. The population peaked at 2,200 on day 560. It would never go higher. The last successful conception in Universe 25 happened on day 920. After that, no new mice were ever born. The beautiful ones kept grooming. The isolated females stayed in their high apartments. Violence continued in scattered pockets with nothing left to be violent about, and one by one the mice aged out and died with nothing coming up behind them. The last mouse in Universe 25 died on May 23, 1973, 4 years and 10 months after Calhoun had sealed the lid. He wrote that the mice had experienced two deaths, the death of the spirit and the death of the body. The first happened years before the second. When the paper was published, most people took the obvious reading. Comfort is the killer. Abundance destroys. A life without struggle tears itself apart. The image of the beautiful ones, perfect coats, completely extinct, became one of the most used metaphors of the late 20th century. Urbanists quoted it. Politicians quoted it. Religious leaders quoted it. Anyone who wanted a warning about modern softness found exactly what they were looking for in those mice. But that was not what Calhoun actually concluded. His real finding was sitting right there in his own words, and most people walked straight past it. He wrote that the killer was not comfort. It was the disappearance of meaningful roles. When the population grew faster than the colony could produce roles worth filling, the mice with nothing to do stopped functioning. The fighters had no one worth fighting. The mothers had no support worth depending on. The young grew up with no responsibilities worth inheriting. The structure that gave each mouse a reason to be part of the species simply evaporated. The food never ran out. The water never ran out. What ran out was the one thing Calhoun had never thought to engineer into his paradise to begin with. Purpose, something to do that actually mattered. Here's the part almost no one mentions. Calhoun was not a pessimist. He did not spend the rest of his career predicting collapse. He spent it trying to prevent one. He kept building new enclosures. He kept adjusting the variables. He was trying to find the single thing that could be placed back into a paradise and keep it alive. And he believed it was possible. He believed that humans, unlike mice, had a choice. He wrote that as physical space fills up, the only way forward is to expand into something else. Into ideas, into new kinds of work. Into building roles that did not exist before. He called it ideational generativity. A long phrase for something simple. The way out is to keep inventing new reasons to show up. The mice had no way to do that. They were mice. But the data from that enclosure is still there. 8 mice, a sealed box, 5 years, total extinction, and a cause of death that no lab test could ever identify. They did not starve. They did not get sick. They ran out of something that never appeared on any inventory, and they could not find a way to make more of it. The question Calhoun left behind is not what happened to the mice. That part is documented. The question is what we are building around ourselves right now, and whether the roles we are creating are ones that people can actually fill. The mice did not have a choice. We still do.